What's up, everybody? One Fun Guy podcast in the studio, hanging out tonight, guys. This is the first TikTok live I've done with my new background. I got some of my old action figures, toys, dolls, whatever you want to call them, up and hung. So this is what I'm sticking with for now. I don't know. It's kind of a work in progress. I've been messing around with some ideas. I did get a new edition. Vampiro's right here. So if you are an old school WCW wrestling fan, you'll know what that is. Vampiro was awesome. He's one of my favorite wrestlers, if not my favorite wrestler. Anyways, Pod Cult's coming up. I got Kelly coming on. Let me share this out to a few people. I will see who's on. I'm not sure who's going to be on tonight. I'm just going to share it out like I always do to some people, and then we will go from there. If you guys are not on and you want to be, say hi, welcome. I am the One Fun Guy podcast. We do the Pod Cult, which is me and my buddy Kelly. He'll be on in a few minutes. I always go on a little bit before just to kind of get everything flowing. I am going to share this out to a few people. I don't know who else is going to be on tonight, guys. I'm just going to see who is available, and then we'll see what we have going on from there. Johnny, what's up? How you doing, my friend? If you guys are new to my podcast or the Pod Cult, we talk about hard rock and heavy metal and everything in between. We always run on tangents, so we always have a topic. We kind of stick to it, but then we always kind of do our own thing, so that's really kind of bizarre. We always kind of have our own little thing happening. Let me see if he is on here, and then if he is, I will send him an invite, like I always do, and we'll go from there. I don't know if this is going to be it or not. This is telling me to pin something, and I don't know what it is. I don't know why I did that, but it said to do it, so I tried it. I've never done anything like this, guys. Again, oops, sorry. I don't require you guys to do anything to hang out with me. Leo, what's going on? If you're new, say hi. Follow me. I'll follow you back. There is no requirement to hang out with us, guys. We don't ask for gifts. We don't tell you to tap our face 1,000 times. We don't ask anything. All we ask is that you be in the moment with us, guys. Say hi, introduce yourselves. Deanne, what's going on? Just be present with us, guys. Be part of the conversation. Talks amongst yourselves. Talk, with each other. That's all we're looking for, guys. We're not doing anything different or anything like that. We just kind of have our own little thing that we do. Me and Kelly hop on. We go live for about an hour. Tonight we're going to go about 45 minutes, maybe 30 minutes. I'm battling a sinus infection. So I'm a little bit under the weather, but not bad enough where I couldn't do the show. So let me see here. I think this is Kelly trying to come on. And it is. What's up, buddy?
Hey, how's it going?
Nice shirt. I like the helmet.
That was a good fucking show.
Was it?
That was so good. It was almost surreal being in the car going in there. Like it was a show that's been like 30 plus years anticipated. I remember, sorry, I go off right away, but
No.
I remember back in the day, 91 maybe, Helmet were gonna come to Europe, and it's like, oh fuck yeah. But then it turned out to be like a mini touring festival, and they would
Okay.
only come to Copenhagen, which was like 6 hours by train or something like
Right.
that, at an exorbitant, an extreme ticket price. It was them and
Yeah.
Faith No More, I believe, and some other band. It was like, and I was a kid with no money. So it's like, yeah, I gotta rob a bank to go do
Sure.
that, and I wasn't prepared to rob a bank. So ever since then, it's been like, I wish I would have seen Helmet,
Yeah.
but oh shit, I don't have it on me. But yeah, so but that gig also would have been like giant
Thanks, Panda.
stage, with a lot of people there,
Right.
festival type of environment. But I saw them at Cobra Lounge, which is a decently small venue, like a few hundred people type of thing. Right at the front of the stage, and sure, they've had some member changes, so it's not the
The original, yeah.
meantime lineup, whatever, right? But I got a drumstick from the drum. I actually had to buy the drumstick from a drummer,
Right.
and I got the guitar pick from the other guitar player, but it was the
Right.
pick that he used the entire show. So I have that here too. So I'm like,
Nice.
yeah, that was super cool. They played the whole Betty album. That was the thing. It was 30th anniversary for Betty. But obviously they after that was done, they played some of the other shit. And Slow Mosa from Norway, great stoner rock,
Yeah.
and War on Women were on before then. They're friends
Okay.
of my wife's. The reason why we managed to get in at all, managed to get on the guest list there. They even dedicated a song to her, which was really nice.
Nice.
Great show, great show. Funny thing about and this is something I never would expect to see at a Helmet show. Oh, I'm so sorry that you're not feeling well.
Yeah, it's all right.
Uh,
I
w-
just started taking some heavy meds, so
okay, so all right. So when we start to see you falling over,
yeah, no,
then.
yeah, yeah.
But yeah, no. So with these three bands that have their equipment or whatever, right? And the Cobra Lounge stage is very small. So the first act, War on Women, they barely had any fucking stage to move around on.
Right.
The drummer, the drum kit, had to be like on the far right side of the stage, facing inward towards the stage, not out, or
Right.
behind the band or anything like that. It's like they just had to make do with whatever things fit. But that just made it all the much better too, because it was like, yeah, no, this is totally the way that I prefer to see shows. It's like small small stage and people that are there because they want to enjoy it. And I'm so old that I'm not interested in the mosh pit anymore. So, and there wasn't any mosh pit really. Like
Right.
people were moving and banging their heads, but there was no like you know shoving and hopping and all that stuff, which is fine with me. It was appropriate. It
Yeah.
was a great time. And also, on top of this, as a bonus for those who have never tried, if you go to Cobra Lounge, go there early and eat some of their food because their food is
Hmm.
amazing. I'm a food guy, and especially their fried chicken. Oh my god, it's
Okay. That's good to know.
so. Just a tip: if you're in the Chicago area and
Yeah.
you ever go to Cobra Lounge, show up early and eat food. It's great.
So, what? Let me ask this question, since I'm also a Helmet fan, and obviously I grew up a Pantera fan and a Biohazard fan, and they were all kind of in the same vein, and they all toured together early on.
Mhm.
Why do you think they never achieved the commercial success that the other bands did in that way, right? Because you had Helmet, Therapy, you had a lot of those bands that just could have been next level, never really quite made it. Where obviously, like Pantera, some Biohazard, somewhat right, Anthrax, kind of, they all took off, but like Helmet seemed to have everything going for them. Like that first album was just in your face raw, and it never took off like the way I don't think it could have or should have.
I think they probably were more famous in Europe than they were in the US. I'm getting that feeling because when I talk
Okay.
about Helmet here, you know, it's like the reaction is, "Oh, that band." So that sort of is amazing to me a little bit, because they were hugely influential, also with the hardcore scene
Yeah.
because of their sort of the military precision, that type of riffs. But I was talking to my wife about it too, both on the way there and then afterwards going back, that they must be much more of a band's band. That when I start to think about it, they probably influenced more kinds of metal than many others. I mean, we've talked about Kiss and Black Sabbath
Yeah, yeah.
and all those guys, right? But when you think about it, their first album came out or they formed in '89. I think their first album Strap It On came out in '90, and Meantime came out in '91, '92, something like that. But the groove that they brought with the simplicity, that type of groove riff, I totally think that inspired Rage Against the Machine. I totally think that they set the stage for Rage Against the Machine to happen. They also started to use the odd time signatures and polyrhythms that prog bands that were still fans, like, again, when you have a band, like, nobody says a bad word about Helmet if you talk to any metal band. Like, they all will know who it is. And they started out as jazz musicians, by the way, Helmet. So, Page was 30 by the time that Helmet blew up, type of thing. So he'd been around. Like, he wasn't just a kid. He'd been playing music for quite some time. And it showed, by the way. You could see that he was 65 years old.
Yeah, right.
At the show last night. So all those prog bands, or all the other metal bands that start to use odd time signatures, Helmet was one of the first to ever do that, and could very well have influenced that. And when you start to think about the nu metal thing, like the Korn and all that stuff, they basically took Helmet riffs and down-tuned it even more. And Jonathan Davis's scat signature scat things, like, are very much in the same rhythm as Helmet riffs. So I think that they are one of those bands that has flown under the radar, as in, sadly underappreciated, sadly unrecognized, but hugely influential. And every band would probably admit to that fuck yeah, Helmet, that was the shit. Long rant. But I really do think so. So that's why it's surprising to me when I start to talk about Helmet. The reaction is, "Oh yeah, that band. Yeah, they're great." It's like, no, they're more than that.
Yeah, so. They. I remember. So, what it was? I want to say it was Earache Records. Put out back in the 90s. I think it was like 91 or 92. And they remember when labels would drop like one or two songs from each band on the artist. It was like a compilation, but like it was more than that. I remember there was one that had excuse me, it was Helmet, Therapy, Fudge Tunnel, Nail Bomb, and there was another band on there, and that was my introduction to Helmet. I had never heard of them before that CD that I bought, and I was a fan ever since.
Yeah. Miyamori, welcome, by the way. I had a live on my own. Miyamori, that's awesome. Band that is amazingly, mind-blowingly good.
Sweet, I'll follow.
Man, Miyamori was so good. I played one of their tunes, and it was fantastic. So I'm glad you stayed on and came on to here. But yeah, and I think in terms of the compilations, yeah, they were common, obviously. And I think that Helmet got a lot of traction from the Judgment Night soundtrack as well, right? And they played that tune minus the House of Pain part last night. So just another victim,
right?
It was so fucking awesome.
That's awesome.
There's no other. The fun thing about Helmet, like I was saying about the odd time signatures, but you go bobbing your head and then they do something that's sort of like, oh, I have to stop and rebob.
I remember when I first heard Fudge Tunnel. I remember
amazing band.
They had that heavy bass sound, right? So that was like kind of like. And they had that doom sound, and they kind of had that like, but they put like that industrial beat behind it, and it was unlike anything I'd ever heard. And then Helmet caught my ear because I knew Pantera before I knew Helmet. And I was like, wow, that sounds oddly similar to like what Pantera was doing with the groove
Hmm.
stuff. But it was different, right? Like Pantera had their sound and then Helmet had their sound. But I remember like Helmet just seemed a lot more like dense. Like their music seemed to like flow a little bit more like to where you could like kind of like feel it, where Pantera was more upbeat and up tempo.
Yeah.
Like the double bass kicks and Dime's guitar was it was different, but Helmet was just like I said, I they should have been awesome. I remember they toured with Biohazard on a tour back
Yeah.
in the early '90s, and neither one of them seemed to catch on. They have their own fan base, you know, and I know Biohazard later on got famous for all the porn stuff, and I know Evan was dating Tara Patrick for a while, and all the girls were coming to the shows, and they kind of used that to their advantage. You know, they were making these videos with the adult film stars, and like, so they became like the cool band because, you know, most heavy metal bands didn't really have, other than the 80s glam metal bands with like the Hot Chicks, you know, and then Biohazard started like bringing them around, and it was just kind of, so you know, they got famous for, I think, other reasons. I mean, I love Biohazard's music, but
Yeah.
I think what kind of put them in the spotlight was the fact that Tara Patrick brought them to the mainstream in that world, and it opened up more fan base to them in the adult entertainment industry because they were playing all the AVN shows. They were playing like they were like the house band for like all the, you know, parties of the porn stars, and it was just kind of,
Oh, really? Yeah. I probably lost them by then. I was definitely in the camp of early Biohazard. I loved it.
yeah, their self-titled and Model were great albums. I mean, they were just,
Yeah, and I don't want to take anything away from Pantera, but I definitely get the feeling that Pantera also heard Helmet and said that's the shit that we want to do.
I think so. So
But they
even,
were better at making it, accessible, while Helmet, coming from a jazz background, probably were more interested in, keeping it challenging for themselves and caring less about what people would like. And the album that was the MTV album Betty, right, was sort of the start of the decline of when they weren't that
yeah,
interested anymore. Um, but I totally think that Pantera probably heard Strap It On, and by the time Meantime came out, more or less at the same time as when Pantera started to do
yeah.
their hard shit.
It's funny because like you look at the bands that like Helmet toured with, right? They kind of toured with more of the sludgier, grindier core bands, where like Pantera toured with Alice in Chains and White Zombie and like all these other, like, you know what I mean? Like, and I often wonder like if Pantera and Helmet would have toured together, if that would have been something that would have been like, you know, kind of uprose both of them, right, for that scene. But it seemed like the Helmet definitely went one lane and Pantera went the other lane, right? And they started, Pantera was touring with Suicidal Tendencies and like I said, Alice in Chains and White Zombie and you know, a lot of those bands, where Helmet seemed to stay more underground, at least in the States for sure. You know, and I wonder if Helmet would have said, hey, why don't we go on tour together? Like if that would have changed the trajectory of where they would have been, or if they're kind of like they like being the kings of the underground. Because there's a lot of bands that are like that, that don't want mainstream success. They want to stay kind of mid range and do what they want to do and not be, you know, pressured by record labels or, in that mix where they're like, you have to sell a certain amount of albums or we're going to drop you.
Yeah, and I think to some extent I think they were poised
Ellie, what's up?
as such. Hey, Ali. Yeah, I think they were poised as such. I think that the record labels, I forget, were they on Interscope? I'm not sure. Like they had just released Primus. I am not sure if they were in Interscope or what label they
Yeah,
were
I'm
on.
not sure. A lot of those labels back then were
But
co-owned by people, and they were the same record label, just different names.
yeah,
Same people owned both,
yeah.
like multiple.
They were all Sony or
Yeah,
Universal or whatever, right?
right.
But that tour that I was talking about that only came to Copenhagen, not didn't make it up the way, further
Right.
up to Stockholm or whatever. That was more or less on the heels of the original Clash of the Titans tour, the big four, the Testament, Anthrax, Slayer, Metallica tour. Um, So they were trying to do something similar, and Helmet was part of that. I just get the feeling that Helmet weren't as interested in making it big. And when we look at Pantera, who were part of the whole hair metal thing before they got angry, um, they probably had more of a drive of keeping in tune with what is that people want. And I think that Helmet had less interest in um, satisfying what people want to do, and then they were pressured by record labels to do that with Betty or whatever, and they kind of obliged, and that was the beginning of the end. And it's still like like at the show last night, there was still someone screaming when they said, all right, we're gonna do a few songs off the Meantime album, and someone in the audience screamed, "That's why we're here!"
Yeah.
So it's kind of that, like that was sort of the convergence of them doing what they wanted to do and not giving a shit, and that was what was appealing. And then you start to do what the record label tells you, and then it stops being genuine, and something gets lost, and the hardcore fans lose interest at that point. So it sort of backfires. While a band like Pantera, that are more in tune with, okay, so how can we make music that we want, that also at the same time appeals to people, because they had been in that already. They had been, through the whole, what record labels expect and all that shit. So they knew how to please both people and record label and themselves.
Yeah, for sure.
So I just think that Helmet didn't have that breadth of experience or attitude to be able to make that happen. And I in my idealistic heart of hearts, I don't think that they were that interested in it, to be honest.
Yeah, probably not, right? And the thing is that when you're grounded, you look at bands that have their like feet on the floor, right? And they kind of know what they want, and they have a drive, and they have an ambition, and nothing's going to change that. And then you look at bands that will do whatever the record label wants them to do, right? We want you to tour with this band, we want you to tour with this band, and they're like, no, we don't want to do that. And they're like, you have to. And I think like when you stay to your roots and you find success in other countries, right? Because a lot of times fans will just say, fine, we'll go to Mexico, then we'll go to Japan, we'll go to Europe. We don't have to stay here. Like we'll go out there. And I think in the United States especially, we are so consumed with product overload, right? We don't grade success on how well something is put out. We always grade success in volume. So like the band that sells the most, or the band, it's not necessarily the one who makes the best music. It's the one who can produce the massive amounts of results. And it's not always the best music. It's just the best of what is out there. And that's the one thing I think where like a lot of the other countries judge based on sound and likeness and relatability, where the United States, all we measured on is how many albums did you sell? How was this song on the billboards? Did it make anything? Did it do anything? If it didn't make any money, we're not interested in it.
Yeah, and I think as an artist too, a couple of days ago, I did a bit of a TikTok post about you can dream about things, but turn it into tangible goals type of thing.
Sure.
And
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah.
What is your goal? Maybe for Helmet it was that yeah, we want to play, we want to be able to play all these places, make enough money to get by and live comfortably, and that's gravy, right? It wasn't, perhaps to them it was like, we want to fill arenas.
Yeah.
We want to be able to buy an airline or whatever, right? That might not have been their level of ambition. So maybe they reached their goal, right? What they wanted to do. Like, this is my ideal life. This is the life I want to live in. I want to play sweaty fucking clubs and get paid well for it. I mean, tickets were, thanks to my wife's friendship with War on Women, we got them for free, but tickets were still 65 freaking bucks.
Yeah.
At Cobra Lounge, right? So if they would have played the Forge, which is twice as large, and the ticket price would have been half that, they would have made the same amount of money, but maybe it would be like, no, that's not the kind of venue that we want to play at.
Yeah.
Like we we would rather get paid more for people that really want to be there at smaller venues. Doesn't make a difference to us. We still make the same amount of money, like and if it's like, well, you can play arenas, it's like, well, fuck arenas.
Yeah.
Maybe they're that kind of band. It's like, but we want to be right in front of the
Yeah.
people that we're playing to.
And I guess it's how they grew up too, right? Like how they play. I know we mentioned before about Caius and Queens of the Stone Age and bands like that. They never wanted to play arenas. They wanted to play for their friends. And, Caius obviously never achieved the success Queens of the Stone Age did, but they're two totally different bands. And I think because Josh Homme had that ambition where he was a rock star and people saw that in him and said, well, why don't you start another band and get the commercial success? And he did that. But I mean, like, for the most part, those guys all just liked hanging out. I don't think it was ever about the people that were watching them, the quantity of them. It was the quality of the people, right? They wanted to play music for people who wanted to listen to it.
Yeah, and to Josh Homme, I think it was a little bit about also like a unique situation. Like he was identified as such a singular talent and a person that everybody wanted to work with, that he could take his pick.
Yeah.
He could play arenas if he wanted to. I remember though that a colleague that I worked with saw them Crooked Vultures at a dive bar in Toronto.
Mm-hmm.
In front of 60 people. It was one of those, like, if you knew it, you knew
Right.
that them Crooked Vultures were going to
Yeah.
play there. So he does that. He does whatever the fuck he wants to, and
Yeah.
and the record labels go along with anything because
Sure.
he has the power to just walk off, and then he
Yeah.
walks. When he walks, he takes a lot of money with him. So it's like you got to keep the guy happy. So he's in a unique position that way. Like he can control the record companies. He can control
Yeah.
what he does. Not many bands can do that. Especially when you're on the cusp of making it big, and it happened to so many bands in the early '90s, like when the whole Seattle thing broke, right?
Yeah.
Everybody, or Green Day or whatever, like everybody wanted to have a punk band, everybody wanted to have a metal band, everybody wanted to have a grunge band or whatever, right?
Yeah.
So you just signed everybody and just hope that 2 or 3 of them would break. And in the meantime, the rest of them folded because they got disillusioned with the whole thing and just said, fuck this.
Yeah.
Well, some returned to, well, let's go back to what we used to do, like Mudhoney
Yeah.
or Melvins or those guys who was like, yeah, we tried to make mainstream thing. Didn't work out. But we didn't destroy our reputations. Like, if we still, sort of do what we always did. Then
Yeah. And I think the Melvins too, I think they're one of the bands that might have walked away from that as well. That said, we don't want that. We don't want to be, because I remember like looking at spin magazines back in the day, like the Melvins were always on the cover, right? They were very, sought after as far as a band. But when you said who's the biggest band on the planet, well, the Melvins weren't even probably in the top 50 at that point. But when you look at the covers of all the hard rock and heavy metal magazines, they were always on it. Buzz was always on those with his crazy hair. And I think they could have if they wanted to. I think they're one of the bands that said, listen, we're happy with where we're at and what we're doing and creating our own music and helping other musicians create their music.
Yeah. Yeah, and we talked about Melvins and their influence a couple of weeks ago, and I think to some extent also Melvins probably influenced Helmet.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, no doubt.
So we said it's like, like Helmet probably said that, let's play Melvins music, but cleanly.
Yeah.
Let's not be punk rock about it. Let's be, jazz.
Yeah.
Jazz precision about it. But I also think that it's like those bands that have the ability to do so and get the opportunity to try it out. And it's easy to get corrupted by money too, right? It's
Sure.
like, oh shit, let's try it. If we can still do what we want to do and get paid more for it, then why the hell not? And some of those bands, and I think the Helmet Melvins are 2 of them, that just said, Eh, no, we'd rather stay on the lower level.
Yeah,
We don't want to get into the arena thing. Like we can't do that. It'll take the fun out of it or
yeah,
whatever. Like we'll be miserable. We'll be rich, miserable people if
yeah.
that's
There
what.
was a really unique thing I saw the other day, and I should have saved it, and I don't remember why I didn't, but there was some artist talking about making $1 million in the music business. You sign a record deal, they give you $1 million. They say you're not going to make a dime until we make all our money back. So they said by the time you sell 500,000 albums, the cost of touring, the cost of equipment, the cost of pressing the albums, the record company takes their cut. They said if you made $100,000 out of that $1 million deal as a band that you had to split now 4 ways, you made 50 grand amongst you. And then they want to put another album out, but you haven't reached the first one. Now you're in the hole. You owe the record company money until you dig out of it. And they said that it's a facade because you're touring and you're popular and you're famous and everybody thinks you're making, millions upon millions upon millions of dollars, but they haven't achieved the commercial success. So they actually are in the rears for the record company. So they're not getting paid until the record company. So all they were given were the perks of touring. They weren't given the benefit of a paycheck, right? They were renting houses. They didn't own the houses they lived in. So they might have gotten an LA mansion, but it wasn't theirs. They were just living in it, right? The record company owned the house. They were just here. They
Ah,
were just in it for the time being. And they said that you don't really start earning money when you sign a big deal till after your third or fourth major tour where you've earned enough money to say, okay, here's your money back. And now you can, have the success that comes with it, right? Because not every band was a Guns N' Roses who on their first album was able to sell 75 million copies, right? That where they said, well, here's your money back. We've gotten everything that you've told us to do. We've done it. Now we want our cut. And the record companies had to pay out. That was real money that they were earning. But it wasn't to the point where no other bands had that success. Motley Crue, maybe. But I mean, you look at all those other 80s bands, right? All the successful ones weren't in that elite level. They were just kind of there.
it's the dangle of the advance that record companies had a good way
Right.
of doing, and they had the lawyers, sort of at their reps portrayed in a way that a lot of bands fell for, right? Um, yeah, the advance is an advance on projected future income. If you don't get that future projected income,
Right.
then that advance you have to pay back.
Yeah.
Um, it's like, yeah, um, I'm gonna pay you to build a car, and if you don't build a car, then well, they want their money back. Um,
Yeah.
some bands were smart enough to see through that. One of my favorite ones is Mudhoney,
Yeah.
right? So they had this guy in a basement called Conrad Uno that had a 16 track tape recorder in his basement called Egg Studios, and I love the sounds, everything coming out of Egg Studios, like a bunch of the smaller um, Seattle bands, Coffin Break, Fastbacks, a bunch of bands recorded with Conrad Uno and Egg Studios, and Mudhoney were
Mm.
one of those that were like, oh my fucking god, you guys are going to blow up because you're founders of grunge and whatever, right? So here's $250,000 to record your next album. That was not an advance, it was their budget for
Right.
recording. And they also had advances, right? But they thought, well, the advance is just bullshit.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
hadn't been educated well enough with that. Mudhoney sound like they're stupid people, when you listen to their music, but they're really smart
Yeah.
guys. So they were like, well, fuck the advance. We're getting $250,000 for a recording budget for our next album. We're going to Conrad Uno. And so they recorded their album for the regular like $15,000.
Yeah.
So they had $235,000 less or left. out of which they just pocketed it and bought houses for
Yeah.
themselves.
Right.
So now
Yeah.
they had houses in the Seattle area,
Right.
all paid for. So it's like, shit, I don't have to pay a mortgage for the rest of my life. All right, so we'll do this album, and then when we're done, we still have houses. So they recorded the album, didn't go so well as they anticipated because they thought we're not. We don't have
Right.
mainstream appeal, you know, and so they made that album. They paid for their houses, and
Yeah.
and then went back to their lives. And the singer to this day is working at Sub Pop. He's if you order any records from Sub Pop, it's probably been packaged by Mark Arm, the singer of
Yeah.
Mud. But that's the life that he wanted to live. But he doesn't have to worry about a mortgage because of that fucking album.
Right. Yeah.
But so you see, so some of these bands could see through that dangle of the advance, while I think it's very common in the hip hop world too, that it's like you are getting $1 million in advance for your next album, and the first thing. Right. I mean, I don't mean this to sound racist or whatever, right? But it's like, it's that thing that, I made it, and now I have $1 million at my disposal. And so many artists, and I'm thinking statistically here, not racially, sorry if it sounded that way, but it's like, yeah, I'm going to be balling. If I just show that I'm balling, at Crystal parties, $250 bottles of champagne every night with hot ladies or whatever, right? Everybody's going to want to work with me and pay me gobs of money to do it. But the thing is that until you have actually proven that you can deliver on that $1 million, people are just gonna sort of come along for the ride, and then if nothing happened, well, they came along for the ride, and cool, right?
Yeah.
While those more frugal people that are like, all right, you want to throw money at me? All right, I'll take your money, and I'll pocket a lot of it and use as little as I can, and then I'm set for the rest.
Yeah. It's really interesting though to see like how bands kind of quote unquote make it, right? Because you have bands that will play locally for many, many years, and then all of a sudden a record exec will come in and say, we want you guys to record under us, and we will press X amount of copies. We will get you an X amount of digital streams, right? Because now it's all about streaming services, right? Like we'll get you out there. And you wonder like how a band will get kind of quote unquote noticed versus a band that will kind of do it on their own, right? Because now we've talked about self-marketing and the power of the internet, where, if you're a band, you can do it all yourself now, right? You can have one band member say, okay, you're going to be in charge of TikTok. One band member, you're going to be in charge of Instagram. One band member, you're going to be in charge of, whatever, Discord. And they can do it that way. But when they get found, I often wonder how they go about that now, right? Because like you're not getting flown out to Hollywood anymore to record an album and become a rock star. You're basically grounding and pounding in your area, right? Mm-hmm. They want you to put on shows and get people in the seats before you go and tour. So I don't know. I just find it, I'd love to get perspective on that.
Yeah, there's a metric because of social media that exists now that did not used to exist.
Right.
And that is something called the conversion rate, which is basically they look at a lot of your socials, right? As in, which in which I include Spotify and the streaming services, but also your TikToks, your Instagrams, and all that stuff, right? How many followers do you have? Is one thing, right? If you have enough people, but how many of those actually engage? How many hit likes or comment on your social posts or whatever, right? Out of your Spotify streams, how many actually add your tracks to their playlists? How many of those people hit that follow the artist on those platforms, right? Because that's where the fan base comes in, because, it could be, you could just be someone that shows up in a lot of feeds and nobody interacts with it, right? but it's the conversion rate is that do people actually interact with the shit you put out? So if you have a high conversion rate, which is that people actually relate to what you do, then that means that people are engaged in it. People feel like they're a little bit more invested. They are more likely to be buying your album. They'll be more likely to go to your shows and that sort of thing, right? And that's an important metric to start to get into, the echelons that are really difficult to get to by just doing it yourself.
Right.
You have to do it yourself to start, and you have to put in a lot of fucking legwork, and you can get a long way from doing it yourselves. But at the same time, if you want to reach the next level, you're probably gonna have to get a manager of some sort, like some sort of coordinator. And that's where we talked about it a few weeks ago too. I think the role of the record label now is when you need a machine, right? You need an organization to take care of your shit, right? To organize a tour, to fix up the stage show, to like who's going to be the live sound engineer, like special effects people, guitar techs, all that stuff. Like there's no fucking way that if you're playing consistently 2,000 plus venues every night, that you can take care of that yourself. Or if you're doing a 50 date tour in Europe or whatever, right? There's no fucking way that you as a solo artist for that can manage that. Right? So, so it's more like there are echelons, so it's like to get from the bottom stage when you're an aspiring artist, conversion rates is a big part. It's like how loyal is your fan base, meaning that the money that I am willing to put into your artistry, what are the chances that I will get that money back and more, right? So that's all it's about. So it's a return on investment, really.
But then what about now, not from the band perspective, but from the venue perspective, right? Because back in the day, if a band was good, then you wanted them to keep coming back. They're like, keep playing us and we'll promote you. Make flyers, we'll pass them out. You had the Illinois Entertainer, right, which was basically like the newspaper of the music community. Every local music store had an Illinois Entertainer, and it would tell you what bands were playing where. But I think the venues promoted it more. Now I think it's more or less like the bands kind of approach the venues, where the venues want it from, at least like for the Forge, right? The perspective of that. They get a medium grade band in there and they do okay, they do moderate, but they'll sell out a massive show if they had like when Cattle Decapitation came. The place, you couldn't fit another human in that door. It was like that packed. Obviously they got the reputation of being one of the best death metal bands in the history of the genre, but there are a lot of good metal bands that could also do that it doesn't seem that they have the appeal to get. And the fans showed out in groves for Decapitated, but you'll see another band there like who did I see when they played there? Oh, like Unleash the Archers, right? They're awesome, but it wasn't filled. Like you could still walk in there and find a spot to stay. But when you look at bands, I don't know, I just find it kind of unappealing for venues as well, right? When they get bands in there and it's like you see how they promote one band but they don't do it for the other band, but that other band might be more deserving of it. It's a very bizarre thing, right?
Yeah. And with venues, the way that it tends to work now, as far as I understand it, is that they are available for promoters. So there are promoters that put on shows, and they approach venues to say that, hey, let's say, for example, Acid Bath, that just a couple of days ago announced that they were going to play in Chicago, and it completely sold out in 2 days, and it's not till December. But it was their promoters that went to a venue and said, hey, we want to do a thing on here, right? And the way that it tends to work is that the promoter has a band or two, or like some sort of tour thing.
Yeah.
and then the venue would probably have an option also to add another band or two to augment that, right? Which could be like a local band that they would want to get in or
Right.
whatnot. Such as the Forge. When I went to see them, um, it was Necrogoblicon, and I forget, like their touring opening
Yeah.
band. But then the Forge could add two more bands to it to augment things to get
Sure.
even more people in there, right? Um, so it used to be different. It used to be that venues um, worked with managers and so on to set up a tour, and like managers of bands said,
Yeah.
this our band is planning to go on tour. Are you interested in having them at your venue? And then it became like a thing. But now it's more like there's a promoter that is putting on a show and thinks that your particular venue would be great for that. So the venue says, sure, pay us. And
Right.
then the promoter takes care of, all the things. And the venue says, well, we have the sound equipment. You send your sound guy. You have your own lighting. We have this lighting, or whatever, right? So the venue has become more of a band Airbnb almost at this
Yeah.
point.
It's
So
it seems they were a lot more vested in the
they
day.
lease their space for shows more than arranging them themselves.
Yeah. Because it seemed
So
like back in the day they had a more hands-on approach of who they wanted to play.
that's totally what it used to be, right? And I mean, I used to put on shows back in the '90s and stuff, right? And it was like we had an image, for our the basement of an old brewery. It's a really awesome space, by the way. It was like brick
Right.
vault. It was such a cool space.
Yeah.
Terrible sound wise because it was echoing all over the place, but it was really cool. But we still felt like we had a brand that we had to stick with. So it was like, this is the kind of show we want to put on. So we'll go out and find bands that will fit our venue, right? But I don't think that that's how it works anymore. I think it's more like, we as a band or me as a promoter or me as an agent for this band would like to play your particular venue. It seems like it's the
Right.
right place for us. So it's sort of flip flopped a little bit in that. And then, the venue can obviously say that, no, yeah, no, we're not going to do a Latin pop show. Even though you think our
Yeah. Right.
right for that. We're a
Yeah.
metal venue, so we're gonna say no to you, but we're gonna say yes to Naked Goblicon or
Right.
whatever, right? So I just think that it's flipped like that, and I think that's an effect of economy that has been, especially after the pandemic. Like how so many live venues had to shut down because people weren't allowed to go.
Yeah.
You know,
Right.
so the ones that are there now have shifted their focus and are more space leasing type of activities, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a weird trend and a weird bizarre thing because back in the day, like I said, Chicago, for as big as this city we are, we've really not had many successful bands come out of here. Obviously, we talked about Disturbed being probably the most prominent band right out of the Chicagoland area, but I mean, like other than Pelican and a few other like hardcore punk bands, we really haven't had much success in the music business, right? Where it seems like LA and New York, the
I
West
will
Coast, East
sound
Coast
I will
always
sound
seems to
so
have the
stupid, but wouldn't Lincoln Park be Chicagoans?
no, that's not
Like,
that's LA.
I know nothing about Lincoln Park. I've never
No,
had any interest in
they're
them, but it's like,
they're an
well,
LA band.
oh, there's Lincoln Park. Oh,
Yeah,
they were around
they're
there.
they're Linkin and we're Lincoln.
Yeah, no. I
So
just thought that they were like doing a funny spelling
yeah,
of, where they got. Yeah, no, I'm sorry.
yeah.
Total ignorance there.
No,
But
I think
anyway,
I think we claim out of all the bands, right? Obviously, Styx is probably the number one. Then I would say Cheap Trick's probably like one and two. We had Enough's Enough. If you were an 80s hair metal band, they were the Chicago like hair metal band. They had Fly High Michelle, and they had a few other bands. Now you have bands
In
that
Sweden, I
have.
always thought that Smashing Pumpkins were
So
Chicagoans too.
right, so Smashing. I was just gonna say, so Smashing Pumpkins, right? Local H was kind of, yeah, as far as it goes. I don't know if they had the success that like the other bands would have had, right? You had, I want to say, uh, what was the other
Smoking
one?
Popes.
It's right. Yeah, I don't know who. Yeah, local H. I mean, you could say yes, right? So
I've
I'll
never heard of
argue,
Local Age.
local H, for sure, right? In terms of being, a household Chicago band, right? But I don't think they had like the commercial success, right? Because I could name a dozen Chicago bands that have played in and around the neighborhood, but like I don't know if local H, other than the skate scene or that kind of scene, had it, right? But like Rage Against the Machine, right? Tom Morello was from Barrington, but they claim LA as their home band, right? So you have a
Right.
lot of guys from Chicago that have gone to play in other bands, but they don't claim Chicago as their home state.
Yeah, and I mean Chicago probably claims more hip hop and electronic,
Sure,
Chicago
I get
house,
that, right?
obviously, and all
DJs, they
that,
got a ton of
right?
DJs, right?
It's not recognized as the sort of or blues or whatever, right? It just hasn't been, hey,
Live on
nice.
air, that was pretty awesome. Jamie, thank you so much. That was awesome.
Yeah, no, I just don't think that Chicago is um, recognized outside of Chicago as a rock
Yeah,
place. Like rock and beyond, like metal, punk, all this stuff. Everybody that's here knows that there's a great metal scene, there's a great punk rock scene, like and they're
yeah.
speaking a little bit to the venue thing that we were talking about, like you can go to Liars Club any night of the week and you will hear a great punk band play there. Like it's gonna happen. You've never heard of them. You'll go to Liars Club. There's a band on. They're gonna be great. It's gonna be great. It's gonna be a
Yeah.
great time. Like there's that supply, right? And Liars Club is one of those venues that probably doesn't give a shit. That like Liars Club still have Evan Dando, the Lemonheads show up there, or Thomas Stinson of the
Yeah.
Replacements, or like these rock legends. I mean, and they'll show up just because they like Liars Club. And Liars Club isn't going to expand. They're not going to get bigger. They're not going to capitalize
Right.
on that or whatever. They're just going to do their fucking thing, and they're
Yeah.
happy doing it. So
Like I said, the Liars Club, and back in the day, like I would say late 90s, early 2000s, the Liars Club used to have a lot of the after party shows, right? So if a big band came and played Allstate, or they played the Metro, or they played the Riv, the after party would be at the Liars Club, right? That's where they went. That's where all the bands went. So I always tell the funny story. I think I might have mentioned it to you before about Gwar, right? They had the Gwar after party there, and they weren't in costume. They were hanging out at the bar drinking. And people were walking by him like, "Where's Gwar? Where's Gwar? Where's Gwar?" And I recognized Dave Brocky, and I was like, "Dave," I was like, he looks up and I'm like, "Hey, great show tonight." He's like, "Thank you." Nobody knew who they were, right? Out of their costumes, people were just walking past them, waiting for Gwar to show up, and they had been there for an hour.
yeah, how
It
would
was
you?
the most
No,
bizarre thing.
Yeah, no, but I mean yeah, it's fucking amazing. Hey man, I'm trying to be cognizant of your energy and your health, and I want you to get well. I know
I
you said
appreciate it. I'm on the mend now. I
half
got
hour, and I
Yeah.
can go on.
No, it's
I'm
all
on a bit
good.
of a high right now.
I'm
I get-
totally.
I'm just gonna before we end, one of the reasons why I'm on a high is because at midnight my first release is going to be available on the streaming services.
Congrats, man. That's awesome. Good
thank
for
you.
you.
Yeah,
I know you
I was
worked
just-
hard for it, and I know.
I was just well, yeah, no, it's nerve wracking, but but yeah, but yeah, and I had a little bit of a listening party TikTok thing, and people were
Good for
overseas
you.
were starting to say, like,
I'm super
"Yes,
happy.
your song,"
Yeah,
or
I'm super
whatever,
proud
right?
that you did that. That's awesome. And I know you've put it pretty much on every one of your videos now. Like if they haven't noticed it. But good, good for you, man. That's awesome. I'm super happy for you. I'm super proud of you for doing that. Like that's awesome. Like we'll tag it when it comes out. Send me the link. I'll put it on everything, and we'll get it out there, and we'll try to get in front of everybody's ears so that they could hear it, and we're get excited for the next one.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it, but I know that I'm a little bit extra hyper today.
Awesome, you should be. I mean, that's a
running
big
my mouth a lot, but
no, that's a big achievement, right? You don't realize like how much dedication and work, you've been talking about this for months, right? And you were kind of like, I remember you were excited about doing it, and now you actually did it, right? So you should be happy and proud that you did it. Like it's a great accomplishment.
it's a roller coaster. It's like you're excited about it, and then you second guess yourself, and then you think it sucks, and then it's like, oh fuck, this is gonna whatever.
Yeah.
Right? But now it's like, it's coming out tonight at midnight,
awesome.
and I'll just roll with it. If
Yeah,
people
but
don't listen, that's cool.
when it
I'll
drops,
put out another one
send me the
after.
link, and I'll get over to Spotify, and I'll download it, and any way we can help over here, we'll definitely do that.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it's Arzenik with a Z, and the song is called Fire Entropy with a couple of slashes in there between the words, but just to be a little fancy industrial.
Yeah.
I'll probably put up an industrial or an instrumental version of it as well, just so people can start using it for background sounds or whatever. I think it could work as that. But
that's awesome.
Anyway, Mark, I really hope that you'll get well. Thank you so much.
I appreciate it. I'm on the mend. I feel it. I was really hurting Sunday, but
we didn't get to talk at all about your record hunting experience last weekend.
No, we'll
I was really that's what I was coming in here to really want to talk about, but got sidetracked. But we'll talk about that too.
Sure, for sure. We always got next week.
Yeah. So get well.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Again, and thanks everyone for listening.
Thank you guys too. And like I said, Arzenik drops tonight, guys, at midnight. I will link it up in the morning. So if you want to head over to Kelly's channel, just make sure you download it, help them in any way you can. Get it on Spotify, get it wherever it's available, and download it and listen to it, enjoy it.
Thank you. Yeah, it'll be on all of them, whatever you prefer.
All right. Well, we'll plan for next week, and thank you everybody for joining in. We always have a good time with you guys, so thank you for all the love, all the support, all the gifts. We really appreciate it, and join us next week when we're back on Thursday night.
Cheers. Thank you so much, everyone. Thanks, Mark.
All right.